Welcome to episode number 112 of the Marine Layer podcast. It's our bullpen preview for the 2024 season. We'll take a look at how we expect the Mariners relievers to perform this upcoming year.
If you're listening to the podcast, here's your reminder. Make sure to download the episodes. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, rate and review, leave a written review, all that good stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, where our video podcast is, like, comment, and subscribe. That big red subscribe button, just click it. And then check us out across social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod.
Let's get it rolling.
The pitch from Acevedo. A drive deep to right field. Down the line. The Mariners win this game 2-1. The dream lives. They're going to the playoffs. 1-1 from Jansen. There you go. Left field. We got a tie ball game. Julio. Oh, baby, what a moment. Tie ball game is 7-7.
And we welcome you to the episode of the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball Podcast Network, recording here on Tuesday, March 19th. And at least Blake Snell is not an Astro.
Well, yes. This was best possible scenario for the Mariners. Not only is he not in the American League West, not only is he not with the Astros, he's not in the American League, period. So for him to go to the Giants, sure. But that's less of the takeaway I have. The bigger takeaway is just Scott Boras continues to have the offseason from hell. This guy's going to start losing clients. I don't know how anybody can look at what he's done this offseason and be like, yep, that's who I trust to get me my payday.
And look at the waterfall, the snowball factor after. There's a mutiny now within the MLB PA. I don't have the names in front of me, but the second in charge of the PA is buddy with Scott Boras, and the players are like, no. Like, we're not, this guy's not operating in our best interest. He's out of here. This is like any movie where you're trying to like overthrow a government. It's like you start a mutiny, you do all these like things. Like that's what's happening in the MLB PA. And people might be saying Scott Boras is the reason of all of this. You got to be furious. If you're Jordan Montgomery, man, it is March 19th. Opening date is in 9 days. Jordan Montgomery said, I want 7 years. Scott Boras says to all these teams, Jordan Montgomery is getting 7 years. And Jordan Montgomery is 9 days away from filing for unemployment. God.
Dude, he is so cooked, Scott Boras. He was so sure he was going to get everybody their money. And look what happened. He overplayed his hand and it cost him. Think about this. Jung-Hoo Lee has not played a game in Major League Baseball. This guy's essentially never played above AA. If you consider the Korean League AA, the Japan to be AAA and the NPB, and then the major leagues, Jung-Hoo Lee's essentially never played above AA. He got more total money on his free agent deal than the 2-time Cy Young winner Blake Snell, who just won it 5 months ago. More money. Scott Boras cost Blake Snell $100 million by rejecting that Yankees offer from a couple months ago. I don't know what's going on in the head of Blake Snell right now. Maybe he's just happy to be playing. I'd be livid if I was him.
Because he probably, if he has another great year, he's going to opt out again and try again. Because he only has one, like it's a 2-year deal. And it's essentially the LeBron contract. 2-year deal with an opt-out after one. And he can just hit the free agent market again. But there's no guarantee that teams are going to spend again. Right? I think Boras sits here and is pointing fingers at the team saying the RSN bubble is causing my clients to lose money. Wasn't it on Scott Boras to like be a little bit smarter when you see $168 million sitting out there? You realize I might not get a lot higher than this.
You're just, I don't even know what I don't even know what the right word to put it into context is. But yeah, like other than he overplayed his hand. If you knew that RSNs were going to cost teams money this offseason, take what you can get. Like, you're just getting greedy at that point if you're Scott Boras. Again, $168 million versus $200 million. I know $32 million is a big difference, but in reality, $168 million sets up Blake Snell's family for generations of wealth. And Scott Boras said, nope, we're going to sit around, we're going to wait it out. And then he was wrong. It's like that, and my brother tweeted out a clip about it. It's like that clip in Seinfeld where George Costanza was so sure he was going to get himself and Jerry more money, only to find out he held out to take less money. And Jerry Seinfeld's like, I thought the point of a negotiation is for your price tag to go up. And George is like, well, I was wrong. You were right. Scott Boras is George Costanza right now because he has cost his clients a lot of money. And if I'm Blake Snell, as we start to wrap this up, if you're serious about opting out and getting into free agency again next year, find a new agent, dude. Like, I don't know how you could go through this again with Boras at your side.
And he's not even setting up Snell for success this season. How are you setting up your client for success signing him 11 days before the season starts?
Oh, you're not.
No.
He's not ready. He's not going to be ready to go for opening day. Now, he may be in the rotation opening day. I'm sure he's been throwing elongated bullpens. And like, as we saw, he was throwing in front of scouts just a few days ago. But that's not real spring training work. He hasn't been there since mid-February. What's Jordan Montgomery going to do when he signs? Like, he's got to build up too. Blake Snell is coming in, like you said, less than 2 weeks before the season and is not thrown in a spring training game. Yeah, not good. Not good if you're Scott Boras at all.
Not good, but I'm sure Scott will play it off and he'll come up with some stupid quotes again next winter meetings to claim that he's back. He's back and ready than ever. Let's get into our bullpen preview as we enter the final segment of the Major League roster to preview here for this 2024 season. Starting off with the flamethrower, how refreshing has it been, Lyle, to watch Andres Munoz this spring coming off a season where he was good. He still had a sub-3 ERA. He had good FIP. He had good strikeout rate. His walk rate was a little high. But overall, watching Andres Munoz last season, it was clear as day that he was not in the same place as he was in 2022 when he was one of the best, if not the best, reliever in the American League. I feel like this is a season now where Andres Munoz can get back to that level coming up here in 2024.
I think the number one reason for that may be health. Think about last year. The guy had foot surgery in the offseason. He basically didn't throw much in spring training last year because he had a lot of recovery time from that. Then pretty early on in April, he got injured and was out till mid-June. So he didn't have a lot of time to have his usual throwing program and get into the swing of things. And as a result, again, like, this is all in context, right? Even last year, Munoz was still one of the best relievers in baseball, but maybe instead of being in the top 5, he was more in the top 12. But now being healthy this year at spring training, full off season, everything, you can tell what the difference is. And the main thing you can tell the difference of is how sharp that slider looks again, which, again, I think all comes back to health and being able to be on the field all winter and all spring.
Think of the difference between his last 2 off seasons. So the last off season where he had foot surgery was after the playoff run in 2022. He got foot surgery, and like you said, he couldn't throw. He couldn't really work out as much as he wanted to. And then he gets into spring training, deals with injuries, doesn't really get up to full speed until June. Well, this offseason, he said he took like a week off. That's it. And then he went back to his hometown in Mexico and just started running. He ran a lot. I think his family is a bunch of track athletes, and he goes out there and he just runs a lot, and he stays in good shape, and he continues to throw and continues to work out. And he said, I feel amazing. Like, I feel great. And it's apparent. This dude in February was dialing 101 on his fastball. In February, like barely into spring, was up to almost full speed on his fastball. And all the signs that we've seen here in spring have just been dominant. It's been dominant. The biggest difference between his 2022 season and his 2023 season, I think, comes down to the location of his slider. Do you look at his spray charts at all in Baseball Savant?
I know that, like, if you're talking about like pitch by pitch and the value of it, or are you talking about the bubbles? Like, which part of Baseball Savant?
No, the spray charts, the heat maps for his pitches and location.
Probably not as closely as you did. You clearly have something to say about it, so go ahead.
It stands out. When we're done recording, I want you to go to Baseball Savant, and I want you to take a look at those heat maps. His 2022 heat map, I mean, it is the hard red, like the deep red, which is high frequency of the slider. It's in the lower outside corner to right-hand hitters, and it is almost a perfect circle. It looks like he has that spot dialed in to the maximum extent, whether it be into lefties, out to righties. He had it dialed in, and it was arguably the best slider in baseball outside of Edwin Diaz in 2022. It was amazing. Last year, that thing sprayed everywhere. He had a lot of trouble throwing that thing for a strike. Now, partially because he was not 100%, I don't think, during the season. I think he was still dealing with something during the season. But also, again, he couldn't really dial it in, and he didn't have a chance to dial it in during the offseason and really get right. So that led to that pitch taking an immense step back, and we saw what happened when he couldn't put away batters as effectively. And I say that as a guy who had nearly a 32% strikeout rate. Oh, he couldn't put away batters. He could. Not as efficiently as he did in 2022 when that slider was dialed in. He became less efficient last year, and it showed. With the walk rate allowed more opportunities, and overall you could tell he was not quite as effective.
The walks is the big thing, like in the command for that matter. Munoz is going to be a great reliever no matter what, likely. But what can turn him into the 2022 Munoz versus more of the 2023 Munoz is the walks. Like, look at the difference between 22 and 23. In 22, he was basically in the top 20 percentile of the league in terms of walk rate. Like, he didn't really walk guys. Last year was a lot different. He was all the way down in about the 22nd percentile of the league. Like, that's a massive difference. You're talking over 50% difference in terms of your walk rate compared to the rest of the league year by year. So if he can get back to throwing a lot more strikes this year, I like that, and landing the slider, which is kind of all tied into one, can be the big difference of who Andres Munoz can be in 2024. I will say, if you want to look at a positive from last year, because he had issues with the slider, it forced him to throw that sinker a lot more. And you know what? That sinker did a lot for him last year. While the slider wasn't working, he found a second pitch to go with his fastball in the sinker. And it I don't want to say did wonders for him. Like, it wasn't like the best pitch in baseball or anything like that, but it was a very good pitch. Like, it helped him a lot last year, and it's a reason he still had a good year last year. Now, imagine healthy Andres Munoz with the slider returned, his 103-mile-an-hour fastball, and this sinker. That is a recipe for success.
The biggest thing out of the gate is when he couldn't throw a slider for a strike, he couldn't get hitters off of his fastball. And if there was a negative from his 2022 season, no matter how hard he threw his fastball was still pretty hittable by the numbers. But the sinker, with the ball running away from the barrel and the arm side direction, while he couldn't throw his slider as often for a strike when he wanted to, the sinker could go for a strike and go off the barrel and help mitigate the damage on that fastball. So if he's going to if he feels good about his slider and he starts throwing it back up to the percentage he did in 2022, I'm like, the sinker is fine. But if Andres Munoz can essentially just go replicate his 2022 season again, that would be great. Like, he honestly does not need to improve anything past that. If Andres Munoz has 10 seasons, like his 2022 season, this dude might go to the Hall of Fame. So
yes,
go back, like, find a way to get back to the 2022 version of Andres Munoz. If that means, hey, I might tune the sinker down to about 10% of the time, and the slider's going back from the mid-50s% of throwing it back up to 65%. Because it's the best pitch, I'm going to throw it the most. So I think that's what I'm looking for, is like the usage of that slider is going to tell us a lot of how he feels about that pitch and how he feels about locating it and how effective it's going to be. Because he's going to have to be, right out the gate here, he is going to be leaned on as the clear-cut one. Mm-hmm. Not, on a night there could be a Brash or there could be a Justin Topa to put out the fire at the end of the game. No, it's going to be Andres Munoz, who's the guy to close things out at the beginning of the season. There's going to be a little bit of pressure there in April.
I agree. And we keep talking about it. April is going to be key for the Mariners. Getting off to a hot start is important in the bullpen, which is going to be a little bit shorthanded to start the year. They're going to need Munoz a lot. Before we talk about a couple of the guys that are going to start the year on the shelf, let's take a quick pause, talk to you about our great friends over at Pagacci's Pub 85. That's over in Kirkland. You guys hear us talk about it. You'll continue to hear us talk about it because we love to go hang out there. Like, what did we just say at the start of this show? Opening day is 9 days away. You're going to need places to go watch the games this year. You're not going to want to watch every single game from home, right? You're going to want to shake it up. Head over there. Head over to Pagacci's Pub 85. There's 22 TVs in the place. So guess what? You want to go watch the Mariners and you want to go watch March Madness? It'll all be on. You can go play pool. You can go order some great food, have some great drinks, the whole 9 yards. And if you head over during happy hour, you can get some great specials on drinks. That's Monday through Friday, 2 to 6 p.m. happy hour. There's $3 domestic beers, $4 Manny's Blue Moons, $4 Mac and Jacks, $4 Wells, and $4 house wines. All of that over at Pagach's Pub 85 in Kirkland. So, reliever number 2. He will not start the year on the team. That is Matt Brash, the second guy we're going to talk about in this segment. 78 appearances the dude made last year. He served as the bridge guy for the Mariners. They leaned on him a lot. It didn't faze him. Put up an ERA just a tad over 3, over 2 wins above replacement by Fangraphs, which is one of the best numbers in baseball in terms of reliever WAR. And how much can you say about Matt Brash? Obviously, his slider is ridiculous. He has a fastball that's extremely firm. But he's going to start the year on the injured list, and the team's going to have to find a way to maneuver through it without him, although he is on the right path to get back.
How do you replace that? I mean, how are you going to replace the combination of volume and stuff for the first month? Let's say he's out the first month safely. How do you replace that? Every time there was a fire at the end of a starter's outing last year, Brash is the first guy in. Every single time, it seemed like. And if he's not there for a month, that's a lot of appearances to replace. That's literally every other game for the most part that you have to replace an appearance for Matt Brash.
Yeah.
It's not something you just snap your fingers and, oh, we'll be fine.
No. When George Kirby would go 6 1/3, not giving up a run or maybe giving up 1 run, but he'd exit the game with a guy on base, you know what would happen? That door in left center would swing open. You'd hear Fireman by Lil Wayne come on. You'd see Matt Brash run out. And you'd feel good about it because nobody's scoring here. And usually nobody did because he'd shut it down. You don't replace a Matt Brash. You're going to have to get by without him, and there are going to be guys that are going to have to step up, but you don't replace a Matt Brash. That's why I was so nervous when the injury happened. And yes, like relievers can be very up and down year to year, and you don't always know what you're going to get. And is a reliever as valuable as a center fielder or a shortstop? Like, no, of course not objectively. But it wasn't just any old reliever you were potentially losing. You can't just replace a Matt Brash. And for the first month, you're not going to. You're going to just have to rely on the guys that you do have to step up in those situations and have matchups play the matchups and have different guys come in those situations to shut the door. You don't replace them.
Like a fully healthy version of this bullpen. We'll talk about Ryan Stanek in a little bit. Like Stanek seems like the guy that will take this role, I think, early on. He's going to be the first high leverage situation out of the bullpen, whether that be at the starter exits or it's from the start of an inning. And then when Matt Brash comes back, Stanek he might still come out first, or Brash might come out first, depending on the day and depending on the reliability. Does Matt Brash still pitch as much with a fully healthy bullpen? Does he still make 78 appearances in this, knowing what we have, what the Mariners have with the rest of this bullpen?
He shouldn't have to.
And
the bullpen was really good last year, but especially this year, he should not have to.
No, not 78 appearances. And we're going to talk about some numbers with some of these other guys and the reason why they should probably, like, you can rely on almost any one of these 6 regulars to get the job done if you need to. There are a lot of things I really liked about Matt Brash's season last year. You're like, yeah, he's filthy, but you're going to hear some common themes, and we're talking about the relievers and why they're successful. You know what Matt Brash did last year? Didn't give up home runs. You know what else Matt Brash didn't do last year? Walk as many guys as people thought he would. For the first time in his career, he had a walk rate under 10% at any level. Under 10%. It was like 9.9, but still, that counts. Under 10. That's pretty remarkable for the kind of stuff he has when you can combine the fact that his slider moves a bajillion inches horizontally and he throws 100 miles an hour, yet he's still able to throw it in the strike zone enough to be effective. And even though he doesn't throw a sinker, he somehow does not allow home runs. Somehow he throws, as it's been described to us, it's a flat, hard fastball. And usually flat, hard fastballs get hit and hit pretty hard. But he didn't give up any home runs last year.
Well, the guy's just filthy. I will say the straight fastball could be the one thing you kind of key in on with Matt Brash and say, okay, if you were going to get even better than you already are, what could you do that much better? I would say it's that. Like when you look at his fastball results, they're not off the charts. The run value is usually slightly in the negative. Not that it's a bad pitch, but it just like, again, it doesn't garner some of the results that other fastballs in this bullpen do or that the Matt Brash slider does. His slider, obviously, is his best pitch, and you don't need us to tell you that. But yeah, I would say if he was going to take another jump this year, like you can look at the command and you can look at the walks. With the pure stuff that Brash has, I don't know if he's ever going to be a guy that's putting up a crazy low walk rate. That just may not be who he is. It's probably part of the reason he is no longer a starter. But I would say if there's anything he could really hone in on to get even better than he already is. And again, we're nitpicking here. This is one of the best relievers in the sport. But if he was going to get even better, I would say, like, you just can't wish upon a star and just have more life on your fastball, so to speak, but just a way to keep hitters a little more off balance with it, because it would get hit sometimes. It didn't get hit for home runs, but the fastball would get hit if you're going to look for one area of improvement for Matt Brash.
Or we could just see more of his cutter. That'd be good. We kept hearing about that cutter last. Yeah, I was going to say we kept hearing about that cutter last year, but he barely threw it.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's not like you said, you can't magically get more life on your fastball. Sometimes it just is who you are. It's your hand size. It's your release point. It's your delivery. It's your height. It's all these things. But what he can control is throwing his cutter a little bit more. Now, as long as Matt Brash keeps throwing 100 miles an hour with his four-seam fastball, I'm not totally sure the Mariners are going to be like, oh, okay, Matt, sorry, it still like sometimes gets hit hard, so we're going to have you throw your cutter more. Because the cutter is going to be a decent bit slower than that. So if he's throwing 100 miles an hour, they're going to keep having him throw his fastball, and they're going to accept the fact that hitters will be sitting on his slider so much that when the fastball does come, they'll just accidentally foul it off or something like that, and his home run rate will stay low. It's going to be really hard to replicate this home run output, like almost impossible, because it's a just exceptionally low number. But the more he throws his slider, the better. Like, just to put comparison, we talked about Munoz and how often he threw his slider in 2022. Brash threw it 14% less of the time as Munoz did in 2022 last year. They're different sliders, I will say. Munoz's slider doesn't move quite as much. It just moves enough to get a swing and a miss. Brash is a sweeper that sweeps more than any slider in baseball. A little bit harder to throw a strike, but it lost my train of thought here. But he still throws it, like, for as good of a pitch as it is, you'd think he would throw it a little bit more, and he could throw it more if he feels like he needs to this year. So there's still some room there. Yeah, there is. But you know what? At the end of the day, obviously, like, if he repeats what he did last year, nobody's complaining about that. We're simply just like looking at areas where he could improve, because like that's what the point of this preview is. Here's what he did really well. Here's what he could still do a little bit better. At the end of the day, the most important thing with Matt Brash is he is on the field healthy and he continues to be effective, which if you've watched what he's done the last 2 years, there's no reason he shouldn't be. Another guy who might not be ready for opening day, probably not ready for opening day now that he's been shut down for a couple weeks with a mild lat strain, Gregory Santos, acquired over the offseason in a trade with the White Sox, coming off a season where he appeared in 60 games, had an ERA a little bit above 3, and he throws hard. Man, were we excited to see this guy get added to this Mariners bullpen in 2024. With all the respect in the world to our guy, Justin Topa, friend of the pod, the Mariners brought Gregory Santos in the day, I believe it was about the day after they traded Justin Topa. Was it the day after? It was like, I want to say it was like 3 or so days after. Same week. So within the same week that they trade Justin Topa away, you could say they filled Justin Topa's role with Gregory Santos, if not added a little bit more that role could provide. Just with what Santos can do with his slider. Yeah, that slider's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Nobody hit it last year, ever. The guy, you want to talk about sliders in this bullpen? If Munoz is on top of his game with a slider, and Brash is on top of his game with a slider, and Santos is on top of his game with a slider, we talk about this three-headed monster. That's a three-headed monster that can just wipe guys out with sliders. That's what stands out the most about Gregory Santos. Obviously he throws hard, he's an imposing reliever. But that slider is going to be what gives him all his success. Do you want to have a stat that blows your mind? No, I'm ready. What do you think the stuff plus on Brash's slider is?
So I mean, I looked this up before the show too. Like I have Stuff Plus down in my notes, so this is not a fair comparison. But I will let you inform the listeners that don't have Stuff Plus currently sitting right up on their computer what it is.
Okay, so the Stuff Plus on Matt Brash's slider is 138. That means it's 38% better than a league average slider by movement or stuff, how they qualify it. Gregory Santos's is 159.
Yeah.
Then Matt Brash's slider, which people call the best pitch of all time in baseball. The best pitch ever of Matt Brash's slider. And Gregory Santos's, by the metrics of Stuff Plus, blows it out of the water.
You know who it ranked behind last year? I'll give you the list. Ryan Presley, Emmanuel Clase. That's it. Those two guys. I'd say those two guys are pretty good relievers. And those are the only guys who are said to have had better pure stuff sliders than Gregory Santos. Like even more than Matt Brash.
He threw 551 sliders and allowed one extra base hit all season.
That's
what the most bonkers thing. He only had a 31% strikeout rate on that pitch. And so like, let me fill in some context here. Like a truly elite strikeout pitch, that should probably be like 50%, give or take. Like truly elite strikeout pitch, that slider should have a strikeout rate of 45 to 50%. But for Gregory Santos, it was only 31%. And his overall strikeout rate was only 22%. With a pitch that good, it should be way higher. Like it should be. And that's what makes you excited about what the Mariners do with relievers, of really unlocking this pitch. And maybe not unlocking the pitch itself and the delivery. It will be where he throws it and when he throws it, which is what the Mariners are really good at. That's something to be really excited about.
Yeah, it is. You know, he really started to use a second offering last year because like the slider is his pitch. He uses it more than anything else, like you said. The other thing he started to throw is a sinker, which he started to learn last year. And if you just look at the results, it will not wow you. Like his results on his sinker last year were not pretty. That being said, he had never thrown it before last year. And it was a work in progress all season. Now, how much time he's had in the offseason to really refine it, because we know he came into camp a little bit behind. He was a bit injured to end the year. We'll see. But that being said, you have another full season to have a year 2 of using your sinker. You would think he's going to learn a lot from what he did in year 1 and can implement it in year 2. Because again, like you're not going to throw the slider every single pitch. He doesn't really throw the four-seam fastball that much anymore. Like the sinker is going to be a secondary pitch. So I'm very interested to see what that can look like in year 2, and even more so, what it can look like when he gets healthy, when he gets into the Mariners pitching lab, and what they can help him do with it.
I mentioned those heat maps earlier. The heat map on his sinker is not fantastic. The red dot was right down the middle. And that's not really a good thing. There's probably a reason why hitters hit 340 against that pitch last year, even though he was touching 100. The other thing that kind of blew my mind, he had more trouble against righties than lefties last year, which should not be a thing. With that slider, should be impossible for righties to have more success than lefties with. But they did by a pretty substantial amount. That made me raise an eyebrow at that. So the reverse splits are interesting with Gregory Santos. I will say that. But with better slider usage, I would have to imagine that flips.
Yeah, you would think so. And again, like the other thing, even getting past like the nerdy analytics here, just time. He hasn't thrown it very long. He just started throwing it a year ago. And I would bet you, like we don't have all the data in front of us, right? Like what the Mariners have internally in their front office and in their database is so much more than what the general public can look at. Like more than Baseball Savant, more than Fangraphs, everything. I would bet you there is something about his sinker that they see and they say, yeah, we can fine tune this and we can help it be a really good pitch. Because if they thought Gregory Santos was only going to have one pitch and nothing else was going to be effective, like I don't think they would have traded for him. I don't think they would have traded for a guy with one singular pitch and that can't do much else. I bet you they see something in that sinker that says, we will help him get better with this. We will help him make that a really good pitch.
I agree.
All right, next guy, Ryan Stanek. Does that name ring a bell? Well, we just talked about him one short week ago on our podcast, so I would hope it does. But this is a guy that, as we highlighted, you should be very excited about. This is a guy with a decorated career as a reliever, had some great years in Tampa, had some phenomenal years in Houston. Now he's a Mariner. When everybody's healthy, he's going to be the fourth guy in this bullpen, which is pretty crazy to think about in itself. But this is a number 4 guy that can pitch like a number 1 reliever if he can find his old form, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so too. So he's going to serve a very important role. He, as we talked about in the Brash segment, I think he's going to, at the beginning of the season, he's going to occupy Brash's role. I think first guy out of the bullpen when it matters the most. What's he going to do after that? Will Scott Servais prefer him in the 8th inning, Gregory Santos in the 7th inning? What part of the lineup do they want Stanek in? Like, it's going to be, I think there are going to be a couple of factors of how they decide how to use him. By the way, I thought we did a really good job of breaking down Ryan Stanek last week, episode 110, our podcast with Goldie. If you want a refresher on what we've talked about with Stanek, like, we did a really good job that episode. So if you haven't already, go back and listen to that one. But there's going to be a couple of factors with Stanek to determine where he pitches and when he pitches. Is he going to throw enough strikes? He's had problems in his career walking guys. And also, what's the home runs going to look like? As I touched on in last Wednesday's episode, Ryan Stanek's best season of his career came when he just didn't allow any home runs in 2022. And that was because he had an extremely low home run to fly ball rate, well below league average, like an outlier low, something that's really hard to repeat. And he's not a sinker baller, by the way. So it's not something that you can just say, oh, well, he throws a lot of sinkers, so obviously he didn't give up that many home runs. Well, no, he just didn't give up that many home runs. So is he going to be able to manage that? Now, this would be the ballpark to do this. This would be the division to do this. It would be the situation where Ryan Stanek does not need to be the closer to have to worry about something like this. But man, I'm fired up to watch this guy pitch, because I really hated when he came in to face the Mariners all these years. And now finally we get to root for that mullet coming out the back. I mean, true reliever hair.
If we get the chance to talk to him, maybe one of the questions we'll have to ask him is which Mariner he is most looking forward to not facing anymore. Because genuinely, I'm curious. There has to be somebody in this lineup who gave him fits. We'll have to look up the numbers against Ryan Stanek.
Can I get a guess? Let me guess. Ty France.
I actually
it was Ty who hit the walk-off double against him in 21. You remember that?
Yeah,
that was.
I was going to say, I bet you Ty France is high on that list, but I am genuinely curious. Anyway, so TJ's right. We did a very full breakdown of Ryan Stanek a week ago. If you want the very abbreviated recap here, like here's a couple of here's a couple of bullet points that TJ hasn't, that are aside from what TJ just talked about. He is very atypical for most Mariners relievers because he can get erratic at times with his command. That's not typical for a Mariners reliever, but he is a guy that when he is at his best can be one of the best relievers in baseball. We saw him start to dip some of his numbers down last year. Like some of his numbers started to kind of trend the wrong direction. But as we know, relievers can be very fickle from year to year. So there's a very good chance Stanek could get into this bullpen and just figure it out and turn back to his at least 2021 form, if not 22 form. The biggest thing I would say, this is, I think, the biggest thing we highlighted with the Ryan Stanek thing last week. Watch for his slider and slider usage, because his slider, just by run value last year, was not an effective pitch. By stuff plus, it's a ridiculous pitch. Like, it's got crazy movement on it. It just didn't get results. Maybe it was being thrown in the wrong spots. So I would say watch how much he uses his slider this year and see what the Mariners can do with it. If I were to guess, you were going to see that slider play up in 2024.
I'm glad you mentioned the location part, because so we talked about that. We did really good detail of that last week, but I'm going to bring up the heat map again. The heat map, like, it tells the whole story. He threw it everywhere, like literally everywhere. And that's not what you want. Like, he legitimately threw 3/4 of it covered nearly the entire plate and well outside of the plate too. And that's not a good usage when it can go literally anywhere. No, you want it dialed into one spot and one good spot only. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. That's the key, because to be honest, like, he's known for 100-mile-an-hour fastball and his splitter, not his slider. for the most part. It is the splitter and the fastball that get the most love because those are the two pitches he throws the most. You're right. Don't sleep on his slider. Don't sleep on his slider. Let's get to now the two lefties. Gabe Speier, coming off the best season of his career, pitching his first full season in a Mariners uniform last season. Get some of these numbers, Lyle. He pitched in 69 games, which is nice in of itself. The ERA barely under 3.8. And think of some of these rate stats. A 29% strikeout rate, a 5.1% walk rate, an expected ERA lower than his actual ERA, a ground ball rate of nearly 56%. For someone who had yet to pitch full-time in the big leagues, to come to Seattle and do that is just remarkable. And he's our guy. So it's all that much better.
I was going to say, is anybody shocked to hear that we were probably most looking forward to this portion of the episode? The part where we talk about the two lefties, like shocker, right? Big shocker.
We tweeted this out today, so I'm gonna bring up this point here on the podcast for those of you who don't stare at our Twitter timeline all day and wait for us to tweet, which if you do, I mean, shout out to you guys. You guys are awesome. But if you don't, let me rehash this stat I dug up yesterday. This thing blew my mind. I mentioned the rate stats. Let me rehash them again. He had a strikeout rate last year of 29.6%, a walk rate of 5.1%, and a ground ball rate of 55.9%. Those are pretty good numbers. Pretty good. Lots of strikeouts, no free passes, and a lot of ground balls, so less damage. I plugged those rate stats into Fangraphs, and I set the innings marker at 50. And I went all the way back to 2002 when Fangraphs started tracking batted ball data. Do you know how many left-handed pitchers with at least 50 innings pitched struck out at least 29% of their batters, walked less than 5.5%, and had a ground ball rate above 55%?
Do you want me to act and pretend as if we didn't talk about this before we started recording and I wasn't the one who hit send on this tweet? I think the way to phrase this is, why don't you inform our awesome listeners how many there are?
Just one, Gabe Speier. That's it. Truly remarkable. And you know what? I'd be willing to bet he's the only lefty in history to do that. I'm dead serious. Like, think about that. Strikeout rates are as high as they've ever been right now. Do you think there was a lefty that hit all those benchmarks who struck out 30% of the batters back in the day? Through at least, like, what? If they were, what are we talking about? Koufax?
Yeah.
Like Gabe Speier and Sandy Koufax? Like,
two equal level pitchers, if you ask me. Totally
Gabe would agree.
of course.
Gabe would agree. Like, Gabe's got the nickname Little Unit. Like, of course him and Sandy Koufax are sitting hand in hand. But I'm dead serious. Like, who the hell's matching that? And by the way, if you go to all handedness pitchers, there's only one other. It's Ryan Presley in 2021. He was unbelievable that year. Those are the only two guys since they started tracking batted ball data to hit those benchmarks. And I'd be willing to say Gabe might be on a Mount Rushmore of lefties to do that ever.
Yeah. Like, obviously we're always going to talk up Gabe because, like, as we do on this podcast, he's our guy. Like, he's awesome. But I'm dead serious. Like now getting into just actual baseball mode and talking about what he brings to the table as a pitcher. Like, how much can this guy even get better with? Here's what I highlighted. He could get hit a little bit less hard in 2024. That's about it. Here's what this guy does. As you mentioned, he strikes guys out. He doesn't walk anybody. He gets ground balls. And I would say it gets, like, you can take it even further than that. Like, you look at the guy's Savant page. Like, I used to talk about his chase rate all the time last year because it was in the 100th percentile of the league. Like, he gets a ton of chase on his pitches. He throws more first pitch strikes than anybody in the league. Again, like we talked about his ability to avoid, like to get a lot of ground balls. He's got multiple pitches. Like, he threw a fastball, a sinker, and a slider last year for the most part. Now he's adding more pitches to his arsenal, which most relievers don't have just a flurry of offerings. I'm really not sure how much more this guy can continue to do to get even better. I think he just has to basically maintain what he's doing because, like, that is about as sustainable of a profile for a reliever as you can find.
He's the ideal modern day reliever.
Yeah.
Like when you sit down, if you go to reliever class in school, and I know you're a huge fan of school, so you sit down and you get your notebook out, you sit at the little desk right here, and you're getting out and you're taking notes, and the teacher goes up on the chalkboard and draws, okay, I want the ideal modern day reliever, and they're going to have three things. They're going to have a high strikeout rate, they're going to have a low walk rate, and they're going to have a high ground ball rate. Therefore, you don't give up a lot of fly balls, won't give up a lot of homers, you strike out a lot of guys, and you don't give up free passes. What more can you ask from a reliever? He is a unicorn. He's literally a unicorn, man. He has the fucking horn on his head. That's his nickname now. If he wants a new one this year, I'm going to call him the Unicorn. That's great. Dude, I'll let Gabe. Yeah. When you go to the field opening day, let Gabe know I told him that's his new name. There we go.
Is it unicorn or little unicorn?
No, he's just a unicorn. He's a full-size unicorn.
Unicorn. Okay. Dude, I was going to say, if this is the shit they were talking about in class when I was in school back in the day, I would have been the fucking valedictorian of Lake Washington High School. Instead, when we were sitting in the middle of history class and I was on my school computer just ripping off mock fantasy baseball draft after mock fantasy baseball draft, and was not the valedictorian. Well, maybe this is why. They should have found more interesting subjects like Gabe Spire's walk rate, ground ball rate, and strikeout rate.
If you went to school like 100 years from now, if you were in history class and they're in the sports section, they'd have to talk about Gabe. No one's done what he's done. That's historical.
Well, I say put it in textbooks if you ask me.
Oh,
that's what I say.
But, I'm down. But yeah, that rings. We're going to call him the Unicorn from now on. That's what he is. Well, we'll see if it sticks.
Okay. Can he have two nicknames? Because like high key, I like the little unit a lot.
He can switch off.
Okay.
But I mean, one of them, he is a small version of it. One, he's a full size.
That's true. Like, in all seriousness, again here, in the short time between when they traded Justin Topa and when they added Gregory Santos, like, there's a reason when Jerry DiPoto talked about all this, he said, yeah, we're perfectly comfortable having Gabe Spire throw in leverage situations. Like, this is before they added Santos, and this is when the bullpen looked like it was going to be Brash, Munoz, and then for a while, Gabe would be the third guy. But there is a reason Jerry DiPoto said, yes, Gabe Spire will throw in leverage situations. His profile backs up the idea that he can do it, and he's right. And to be totally honest with you, Gabe Spire's still going to throw in leverage situations this year, because there's going to be points during the year where Brash is unavailable or Santos is unavailable, especially actually here early during the year. He's going to be throwing in high leverage big time. Like, there's going to be Munoz, Stanek, and you're going to see Spire throwing high leverage. Honestly, well, it's interesting. I was going to say, could we see Gabe be the leverage guy a little bit more over, or the bridge guy over Stanek? I guess it depends on what the lefty matchups look like that night, because what he is great at, obviously, is getting lefties out amongst a lot of other things. So I guess it depends. But anyway, point being, as I stop rambling here, you will see Gabe Spire, even with a fully healthy bullpen, throw in leverage this year. Like, you will.
That's our guy right there.
Yes.
Our guy.
Woo! Well, we've got another one to piggyback off of with that.
Oh, yeah. So let's follow the North Star here to our final contestant of the bullpen preview.
You know, as they always say, relievers are the really good personalities on a baseball team. Not that there's not other good personalities. Of course there is, especially on this Mariners team. But not only do they, is it a kind of general consensus that that's the case with relievers? They often say with lefty relievers, that's the case. And well, I would say that plays right into our narrative with these two. So let's get to Sauce here with Taylor Saucedo. And to try to hone it in here, when he's not, like TJ's already laughing, I will say, when he's not busy talking about following the North Star home and Babe Ruth being fake and taking Josh Rojas 475 feet up to the Ted Williams sign, like, when you put all that aside with the awesome personality that Taylor Saucedo is, this is genuinely a very, very good reliever. This is a guy who put up a 3.59 ERA last year. They leaned on him heavily. He made over 50 appearances. He gets a ton of ground balls, similar to how Gabe Spire does, and he doesn't get hit hard. Like the one thing with Sauce is he does walk more guys than Spire does, but this is, again, a profile of a very, very solid reliever that does a lot of things well that play in a bullpen.
And he's he's not like average in any sense. Just think about how he throws. Think about his pitch profile. He is so unique. He's such a different look than everyone else the Mariners have in this bullpen coming out. And he still throws pretty hard. That makes it like pretty tough. Could you imagine like you come in and you face Stanek the first time through the bullpen and he's buzzing 100 up at your nose and he's throwing a splitter and you have to keep track of that and you're like, oh, scrambled. Your brain is scrambled. Then you go back out there the second time and there's this lefty up there who's 6'5". He throws like all the way down here. When he throws it, like you said, it's over the ball, not under the ball.
Go check our social media pages if you don't get that reference. But I'll say it one more time.
Go check the latest Saucedo post.
Yeah, as I'll say, I'll double up with TJ here one more time. It's over the ball, not under the ball.
Not under the ball. But he's like coming at you with sinkers and sliders coming out of this just funky arm slot. It's hard to hit. Like it's truly a different look, and really what makes him so effective, he can get some extension on that and gets just a lot of ground balls. He lives up to the profile of just not giving up hard contact, and like when it is hard contact, it's pounded right into the dirt. And it's hard to score on guys like that because you got to string more hits together, you got to string more opportunities together, and that's not very easy.
No, it's not. It's not. And the sinker did wonders for him last year. That was his best pitch. It's funny. Maybe this is a product of a small sample size. His curveball actually garnered some good results last year. He didn't throw it very much. I don't know if that's a pitch that they'll want him to throw more moving forward or not. But just in the short sample size he threw it, like, guys didn't really hit it. I don't know if that's something he'll throw more, but I was just kind of looking at that saying, oh, that's interesting.
Something I wonder with both Spire and Saucedo, they have so much ground ball contact that they give up and that they rely on to get outs. With this Mariners defense this year, these two could be the ones affected by it the most if the Mariners do have a step back in defense, because Jorge Polanco, not graded as a plus defender. The Mariners' third base platoon does not grade the same as Eugenio Suarez does. First base is graded about average. And then J.P. Crawford, we've detailed his struggles at shortstop, especially going to his right. How are these guys? How is their numbers going to reflect like similar? Or will they take a step back because of the amount of balls that get put in play on the ground and not as good defense behind them? So Sauce, for example, had a 197 average on ground balls last year against him, which is really good, by the way. Does that number creep up? What if that number creeps up to 240 because the Mariners just have less range in their infield and less ability to get outs on grounders like that?
Well, then he'd be a proponent of some bad luck because like all the expected data would still say, oh, he's doing what he's supposed to do. But if the defense is not up to the same level that it was a year ago, then it is possible. I would say it would affect Sauce a little bit more than it could Gabe Spire, because Spire strikes more guys out. Like, that's the big thing. Not that they both wouldn't be affected in some way, but like Gabe's strikeout rate, obviously, as we just talked about, is ballooned up a little bit more. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Hopefully we're just totally wrong about this Mariners defense. Perry Hill's worked with them. Jorge Polanco takes a step forward. The third base platoon can be at least average over there. And it helps the pitching out a lot, because with ground ball guys like Sauce and Spire, and with somebody like George Kirby too, when you look at the rotation who gets a lot of ground balls, like, it would be very beneficial to have a defense that can really play well behind these guys. So hopefully they do. But no matter what the case is with the defense, Sauce had a great year last year, and his profile says he should have another very good year this year. Like, that's what's pretty crazy about the first six guys we've outlined. And these are going to be the main six guys in the bullpen, or so we believe, at least entering the year, that like all of their profiles say it's sustainable. Now, you never know what's going to happen. You can't lock anything in, right? Like, baseball is unpredictable. Things can happen. But when you look at all the data, it says these guys should carry this over. And that's what's pretty incredible. Like, there's other bullpens with guys who had good years, but there's a lot of data that says, are they going to take a step back? With these guys, with these six, it says they should keep going.
Another remarkable thing, that was Saucedo's first full big league season.
Yeah.
So, like, we're talking about that in a sense of, oh, that was only his first full big league season. Like, what is he going to do to get better next year? It's fun to think about.
Very fun to think about. Maybe start with giving him a bat to let him hit.
I think they should let him hit. If there is one pitcher they're going to let hit, it should be Saucedo. To be honest, I can't think of anyone else I'd rather see swing.
Like, we can talk about Bryce Miller. Like, I'll give him like the fact his swings in batting practice in the minors looked pretty solid. Or if you want to go back to Marco Gonzalez last year, like he obviously hit in college. But if you're talking about to blow out one way or another, and just for like shits and gigs, you're going to let a pitcher go up there and hit, like that's who it has to be. Like if we're talking from a content perspective for people on Twitter, for people sitting at home, for the two of us, like, no, it has to be Sauce, because either he's somehow going to get a hit and we'll never for the rest of time hear the end of it, or like Cal said, I guess this part of our social media interview with him hasn't come out yet. It will at some point. But as Cal said, if he starts seeing spin, he's done. And Sauce just like flails out at a slider and looks ridiculous. Well, then that's going to be content for us too. So yeah, if there's going to be one pitcher that hits, my vote's going to him. So
let's wrap this up and touch on the guys who are right on the edges of this bullpen, right on the margins. Are there any ones you necessarily want to highlight? It seems, if I were to guess, that Tyson Miller has a really good shot to make this bullpen, that Cody Bolton has a really good chance to make this bullpen, and then Trent Thornton would also be a guy who's well in the mix for that. They're gonna. Am I forget? I think I'm guessing Carlos Vargas. From what Shannon Dreher was talking about earlier this week, it sounds like the Mariners would prefer he start in the minor league so he can work out his control and throw more strikes. So that's why I'm not really putting him on that list, because I think if they have the options, they will put him in the minor leagues, at least from what I've heard. So any of those stick out to you?
Well, I think Thornton's absolutely going to be in with the injuries, but to be honest with you, even if Brash and Santos were healthy, I think Thornton would be in there no matter what, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
If there were no injuries, I think this bullpen would be already set for opening day. I think it'd be the 6 guys we outlined. It'd be Thornton and it'd be Austin Voth to have a long reliever. Yeah. Because like it's kind of easy to forget with Trent Thornton, right? Because the first 6 guys were so good last year and there's so much firepower at the top end of this bullpen. Trent Thornton had a 2.01 ERA last year. Like 2.01. And he actually has some decent stuff. Like, I like what he brings to the table. So, again, at least to start the year, I would say even if this bullpen was fully healthy, he'd absolutely be in there. And I think he is for sure going to be in there with the injuries. So, like, I almost put Thornton in a different category. I think he proved enough last year to warrant his spot to start the year. And then it's everybody else you're looking at.
That's a good point. There are a couple, like, Paul Sewald types though out of this group. Tyson Miller's one of them. He legitimately looks like Paul Sewald. Like, I think were we watching him throw? He was starting a bullpen, right?
Yeah,
while we were there, and he looks just like Sewald.
And that's exactly what Scott Service said. He said like he is very much of the Sewald breed, like his release point and the arm angle and everything. Like, it reminds him a lot of Paul Sewald. And guess what? Tyson Miller hasn't let up a run this spring. He's been really good.
And I think he used the same comp for Cody Bolton too. I think he's also out of the Sewald mold. I'm pretty sure.
So have we figured out what the Steckenrider bucket is? Like, I hear that talk on Twitter. Like, there's some reference point for it.
So the Steckenrider bucket is essentially they're referencing like this current like iteration of the bullpen of how they've gotten relievers out of guys who haven't been that successful in the big leagues before. And Drew Steckenrider is what Scott Service likes to use as the best example of that. Because Steck was a 1 year, like, he was really good for one season.
Right.
Pick him up, like, unknown guy, plugged into the system, works out really well. And he's a guy they bring into camp without much expectations, just want to see what you have, work with your stuff a little bit, and all of a sudden it turns out well. And you can pick relievers year after year after year after year that has been successful for the Mariners. Sewald and Steckenrider, I think, were like the 2 poster childs of that to start off in 2021.
So I figured that's what the definition was. So why is it Steckenrider? Like, wouldn't Sewald make the most sense for that? Because Sewald carried it over. Steckenrider was only good 1 year.
Maybe because he was only good 1 year.
Maybe that's what they mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. It looks like, so for where the bullpen sits for opening day, I think it is very safe to say that the guys with secure spots are Munoz, Stanek, Sauce, Spire, Trent Thornton, Austin Voth. And then it's 2 spots that are up for grabs. Now, if you're right that starting in the Carlos Vargas will start the year in AAA, then you look at Tyson Miller and Cody Bolton, right?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. It feels like those 2 guys have probably earned their spot.
Right. That's what it sounds like. And then depending on how many strikes Vargas throws, he could be up if Brash or Santos is taking longer to get back.
And I'll say this too, like Tyson Miller and Cody Bolton are going to have their opportunity here with Brash and Santos down. When those guys get healthy, it is non-negotiable that they're getting back into this bullpen, obviously. But Miller and Bolton have a chance to prove themselves in the first couple weeks to stick around and to earn their spot. If they're pitching flawlessly, they'll stick around. If they really get out of the gates hot and they're not giving up runs, they're not going to get moved down. They'll stay. So it's an audition for them these first few weeks.
And just remember what this was like for Spire and Saucedo last year as well.
Yeah.
So
and
like
Topa.
in terms of, and Topa, how they had to prove themselves, and they did, and they continued to pitch well, and that happened. Like we talked to Spire and Saucedo when we were down in Peoria, and like joked with them a couple times, like, man, it's got to be so relaxing this year, right? Compared to last year. And Spire was just known to us, like, it's like, man, like I gave up a couple runs yesterday, but I felt good. So it's like, I'm chilling right now. But he's like, if this was last year, it's like, I'd be pissed right now that I did that. Because I'm trying to make the team. Right. Now Spire has made the team, and now Saucedo has made the team. And I would imagine those guys, Tyson Miller and Cody Bolton, sort of feel that way if they were to have a poor spring training outing. But see what one season can do for that, and they could all of a sudden find themselves as established.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like, it'll be interesting to see where those guys get plugged and played in bullpen situations when the season begins. Obviously, they'll be toward the back end because they're the least proven of the group. But very, very interesting duo of guys that have some opportunity to be good. And we'll see what they do in the month of April. Because, again, it's going to be an audition for them. And I'm interested to see. So, yeah, it'll be good. I think that about covers our bullpen. I think we covered, we talked about everybody. Obviously, there's guys in the minors that'll get their chances when the season comes about. Because obviously, like the bullpen that starts the year, just like a roster as a whole, is never the one that finishes. You'll see guys get changed around a little bit. There could be injuries. There could be guys just pitching well in the minors. Yeah, I'll be interested to see who else gets their chances this year.
Yeah, well, you never know. You never know.
Right.
Like the Mariners, just think about it this way. The Mariners bullpen, for each of the last 3 seasons, it has not looked the same on opening day as it did at the end of the season. Never. Usually there's like 2 or 3 pitchers worth of turnaround that go from established opening day versus established, we're making a run to the postseason. This is who we want on the roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch, but we know this is their strength. It's been their strength the last 3 years. It looks like it's going to be their strength for the 4th year in a row. I can't wait to watch all these guys get back up on the mound this year. So there's our previews. There's our major league previews, we should say, as we talked about on Friday's episode. For this upcoming Friday, we'll do our minor league preview. We're going to have Jim Callis back on, returning guest, 2nd year in a row to help us do our minor league preview. Best in the biz. We're excited about it. We can't wait to have him back on. So hopefully you'll tune in for that. That'll be a fun show Friday because there is a flurry of guys to talk about. Like, this farm system is a bunch of fun, and there's guys that are going to take some steps this year. So we'll break it all down with Jim then. For now, that'll wrap it up for this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. You guys know the drill. If you want to listen to the full form podcast, you can do so wherever you get your audio pods. Make sure to download, download, rate and review, leave us a 5-star review. The reviews always help. And why not, right? Like, it's easy. You're doing us a big favor. So just leave a 5-star review. Like, comment, subscribe over on YouTube, and follow us across social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod. That's TJ. I'm Lyle. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.